Welcome to the Pipeliners Podcast, episode 197, sponsored by Rosen, the global leader in cutting-edge solutions across all areas of the integrity process change, providing operators the data they need to make the best integrity management decisions. To find out more about Rosen, go to rosen-group.com.
The Pipeliners Podcast, where professionals, Bubba geeks, and industry insiders share their knowledge and experience about technology, projects, and pipeline operations. And now your host, Russell Treat.
Thanks for listening to the Pipeliners Podcast. I appreciate that you're taking the time, and to show the appreciation, we give away a customized Yeti tumbler to one listener every episode. This week, our winner is Steve Biagiotti at Dynamic Wrist. Congratulations, Steve. Your Yeti is on its way. To learn how you can win this signature prize, stick around till the end of this episode. This week, Glenn Kelly, CEO of Muddy Boots, is joining us to talk about running pipeline field operations from your phone. Glenn, welcome to the Pipeliners Podcast.
Thanks, Russell. Yeah, happy to be here.
Well, we've been trying to get you on for a while, and I'm glad we finally got you roped in. This is perfect.
Awesome. Yeah.
So before we get going here, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your background and how you landed in oil and gas and with Muddy Boots?
Yeah, for sure. Right. I started out my career as a computer science guy. I went to university for that. And fortunate enough to land my first job with Amoco. So I worked for Amoco for 17 years. And then I did a longish stint in consulting, all for the oil patch. Probably worked for 60 different companies on varying projects. And then I put together a company called Pepper, which stood for Production Equipment Performance Reporting, and it was all about natural gas compressors and how you optimize natural gas compressors. And if you're a field guy, what are you going to do to tweak those to get different performance? And after selling that company, I got Muddy Boots going. So I had a longish career, focused on IT for pipelines and operations. Yeah.
Cool. So how did you, that's kind of an interesting story. So you sold Pepper, which was a software company, and how long did you lounge about before you got the itch to do something new?
Well, I didn't lounge about it at all, right? There was actually, to use one of my divorce lawyer's terms, there was an overlap there. So there's about 2 years, I guess, I'd had Muddy Boots in mind and got it rolling with another fellow while we were selling Pepper, right? So
I see.
at one point in time, I was consulting and doing Pepper and doing Muddy Boots, and now I'm just down to Muddy Boots, which is awesome.
Yeah, I can relate to that story, Glenn. I can definitely relate to that story.
You betcha.
So how did you get the idea for Muddy Boots? I mean, it's always interesting. I don't get a lot of opportunities to talk to, for lack of a better way, a software entrepreneur, right? And it's always really interesting to me how people get their ideas and then how they take that idea and actually turn it into something that's actually delivering value to somebody. So how'd you get your idea?
And it's the greatest feeling to have an idea and actualize that, right, and make it happen, right? The inspiration for Muddy Boots came from decades of looking at what goes on in the field and the growth from one application for guys that were using pieces of paper to techs and operators that had 17 different tools they had to use every day. And I would get comments from people in the field like, please don't bring me another tool to help me do my job, right? We don't want any more software. And I had this great realization that we'd been building software from the head office out for all these years. And that's what, every discipline gave a tool to the field guys to use. And you needed to reverse that. You say, what goes on in the field? How do I capture that data? That data is then what's needed by everybody. And it came to light one day. I was hired by a largish software firm that wanted to bring a field data capture system into Canada, and they said, should we do this? And I said, well, this market's saturated, right? Unless you make a step change in the way that's done, you're going to fail. And I said, I don't know what that step change is. But as I said that to that individual, I realized I did know what that step change was, right? You need an all-in-one tool for operations designed from the field in. And yeah, that was the origin for Muddy Boots, right?
Well, I find that fascinating. I have worked around field operations and field operations software off and on most of my career, and I've seen various waves of technology come through. Right?
Yes.
I remember at one point everybody was getting some kind of handheld device, and they would set it in a cradle and it would sync up, and then they would run around and they'd do all of the things they would do on the clipboard, but they do them into a device, and then they'd come back and plug it in a cradle and it would download all its data and sync back up for the next day. And, we've come a long way from that. And I have certainly had the experience working around measurement where, you go out with a measurement tech, and that guy's got to have a dozen to 24 different software applications on their laptop.
Yes.
And they all conflict a little bit.
Absolutely.
In one way or another, right? In terms of the drivers and communications and all that kind of stuff. So
and there's still guys out there running old DOS machines today just to get that stuff to work, right? But and I think the timing for us was fortuitous. We came into this with this mission to be all in one for the techs, the guys in the field, and the computing technology was ripe, right? We put out software that obviously works on a desktop or a tablet or a handheld or a smartphone, and people pick and choose what they want. And in the beginning, we get pushback from the older operators that say we don't want to, use technology. But I talk to them. I tell some of these guys, if you know how to text your girlfriend, you can use our software, right? And we made this really easy to use tool for the oil and gas guys, and 70-80% of them are doing all of this on their phones today, right? That's what's happening, and it works really, really well.
Yeah, there was a very interesting article that was written by the founder of Rice Energy. And he was talking about how they transformed how they operated their business by getting everything on everybody's phones.
Yeah.
Right. And that when you say that, that's, like, well, of course, that makes so much sense. And yet when you try to do it, it's a way different level of complexity, right?
Yeah. Buy everybody phones and you're done, right? No.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So the other thing I think that I want to visit with you about is, so you're in Canada and you started Muddy Boots to address a problem in Canada, I think more so than the U.S. Is that a fair comment?
That's a fair comment. But was part of the vision, right? We set out to build this all-in-one tool, and, nobody's about to give us $20 million to do that. So you had to pick a place to go into the market. And what was going on in Canada at that time was a new provincial regulation that said you had to have flow schematics, right? So all the measurement people in Canada, all the pipeline operations in Canada have, government mandated flow schematics.
Let me interrupt you, Glenn. Could you define for us what a flow schematic is and how it's different than a PNID diagram?
Yeah, definitely. It's a subset of a PNID diagram, and it's really tracking every product flow through every device that changes that product flow or stores that product. So tanks, meters, schematics, pipelines,
Separators,
separators,
heaters,
yeah,
valves, all that kind of
all
stuff.
that kind of stuff, right? And we use that as an entry point to build a schematics tool. But for us, that schematics tool was the definition of your data, your master data. So, in our software, when you add a tank onto a schematic, you've added that asset into your inventory, right? The schematic and the asset data are one in this application.
Yeah, so this is actually one of the reasons I wanted to get you on and talk, because I can tell some real horror stories about drawings that I had or things I put together to do a project, and then going out to the field and finding out that what was actually in the field was something significantly different than what I had in my drawings.
Oh,
And I don't know how many times I've done a project where a big part of the project was just driving out to all the sites and doing sketches of what was at the sites, and then sitting down in an office and popping up Visio and just doing a simple block diagram of here's what's all there.
Yeah. And it happens time and time and time again, right? And you get things that have evolved and changed in the field, and nobody who does production accounting or other functions knows about that, right?
Right.
It just happens all the time. It's a communication gap. We just had a review for a new customer last week. We fired up, and their production accountants were astounded to learn, where certain flows were going and that certain meters weren't even being used, right? And just getting them together with that common diagram, it just works, and it works great.
Yeah, I think the other things that I really like about y'all schematics is, so in what I typically do when I'm doing a SCADA project, right? We start with two drawings that we do. We do a topology diagram, which is basically what is all the communications gear and how is it physically connected, how is it wired, and what are the radio paths.
Yes.
And then we do a data flow diagram, which is a simple block diagram of all the software pieces and how the software is connected.
Mm-hmm.
Is it OPC, is it Modbus, whatever.
All right.
The other thing we have to have is we have to have a good diagram of the process, because that's what you've got to bring into the control center. And when I look at the Muddy Boot schematics, what I see is good diagrams of the process. And they're easy to understand too. A PNID, I can read a PNID, but many people cannot. And it takes a little time to actually look at a PNID and say, okay, what on this drawing actually matters to me?
Exactly. Yeah.
Where with just a flow diagram, what matters to you becomes abundantly apparent right from the time you look at it.
Right now. Yeah. And
Yeah.
With our schematics, you can click on a point in a diagram and say, okay, tell me everything behind this compressor. And they go, okay, there's 72 wells here that you're going to impact if you take that compressor down,
right.
And so on and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah. And, again, I think that's one of the things that in the real world, answering that question is never that straightforward.
No, it's
so at least I know. Well, I won't tell all my horror stories that I could tell about thinking I knew what was upstream and actually not knowing what was upstream.
Yeah.
So let me ask this question, because there are a ton of tools out there that automate the work around all the equipment in the field. They automate the asset list, and they automate the work orders and the MOCs and all the recurring maintenance tasks and all that kind of stuff. I mean, there are a plethora. There's a bunch.
There is a bunch. And competition is, very real for us on a point-by-point basis, right? We are not the best maintenance system out there, and we're not the best safety system out there. But we are that all-in-one tool, right? So if you want one tool for your guys, you can come to us. And the value there is you get all the data from all of these functions in one place, right? So, I mentioned schematics, and that was the literal tip of the iceberg. We then said, what are all the activities that oil and gas people do? And you take a look at inspections and valve tests, and am I managing the level in my propane tanks or
And
my methanol
emission
tanks?
reports and
Oh, mission
safety
and it's
surveys and
huge,
on and
right?
on and on.
Yeah. So at this point in
Well, and
time,
I think the challenge, if you will, for the field operator, for the field technician, is that, well, I'll put this together. I'll put this together maybe a different way. There's really two different things that are occurring, I think, in the organization. There's analytical tasks that are being performed by engineers, where the ability to perform the analysis is the key thing they're looking for in the tool.
yes.
The guys in the field, their primary job is keep it running and provide the data that other people need.
That's right.
I mean, that's a great oversimplification, but I think that's fundamentally the challenge.
Yeah.
Is that again? I guess does that make sense? How does Muddy Boots kind of address that reality?
Yeah. Lots of answers to that question. I'll start with the engineers first, which is something I don't normally do, but they get the data they need. So if I'm looking at what measure tests and I want to trend what's going on over time and look at that and change the frequency of those tests, I can. If I'm an emissions guy and I want to look at, vent rates and fuel use and flare use and all that kind of thing, I can look at that, trend that, and do some analysis there. For the field guy that wants to keep things running, what does he do to keep things running? And there are a lot of talk these days about operations by exception, but so we're moving the field person into doing the highest priority things, right? If there's a simple piece of maintenance to be done on a separator, another piece of equipment, that gets scheduled. If there's regulatory inspections need to be done, that gets scheduled. So, with the tool, the critical stuff gets scheduled for the operator, so he knows or can know the most important things to work on every day, right? That's what we're doing for the operator.
Well, that you just said a mouthful right there, Glenn. I mean, knowing the most important thing to work on every day, that is not an easy question to answer every day, because that's a very dynamic thing, right? There's a lot of things that go into it.
Exactly.
And yeah, to me, when I think about this, and if I were trying to educate, pipeline operators about the challenge around all this, is that I think where we've got to get to as an industry is we need to think differently about the field operators, the field technicians, and what they need in the way of tools versus what the engineers and the schedulers and the managers need in the way of tools, because they're kind of fundamentally different, right?
Absolutely.
And the real benefit is if I can get a tool that's easy to use, that keeps me connected with others, then I'm more likely to use that tool. Which kind of raises one of the other questions. How do you deal with the reality of, folks working out of their trucks and in the backwoods and in and out of cell connection, or in and out of access to the company internet?
Yeah, so the mobility question, and for us, every task that our operators do, they can do offline, right? They fire up their task list, their run sheet, whatever you want to call it, in the morning, and they can be without service all day long. Yep.
Yeah, that's you'll appreciate this. The listeners might need me to unpack this a little bit, but the difference between a native app and a web app.
Yeah.
Right. My lead developer, a gentleman by the name of Scott Williams, he's been on the podcast before, and he and I have worked together for a long time. And I remember we would get into this conversation about, well, I want that to work on my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And then that would spin out into, well, what do you mean by that? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And what I meant by that is I want it to work on my phone without having my phone connected to anything. And what he heard was I want it to work on my phone, which are not the same thing, right? There's
not
a
the
whole
same thing at all.
different level of challenge, if you will, to build something as a native app.
Yeah. Yeah. No, we set this up on guys' phones. They do their run. The majority, especially in Canada and the remote places, they're unconnected and everything just works. And quick story for you. I was out at a gas plant one time and I was trying to, egg on the operators to tell me what they didn't like about the software. And one of them, basically told me, you got to quit asking the questions because the software just works. and that was the best compliment I could ever get.
That's
right?
about as good a compliment as you can get, particularly from a field guy.
Yeah.
Because they're the ones that'll really stress test something. So let's shift a little bit, because there's another dynamic in the field that I think is important to understand. It's very common in the field to be working with contractors. Like I may have an operator, that is like, I might be a pipeline operator and I'm running around in my truck and doing the things I do. But I, at any given time, might have 2 or 3 or 4 contractors doing things for me.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. Some of that may be recurring maintenance. Some of that might be recurring measurements. Some of that might be special projects. But, that need to collaborate with others is a big deal.
It's huge. It's huge on the scheduling basis. When are people going to be there? What are they going to do? And the information they provide once they do that work, you need somewhere. So there's this plethora of PDFs and emails that goes back and forth today with all of these people. And we recognized from the start, it was part of our design to say, okay, if I'm looking at a single location and all the people that are going to work here, some are our guys and some are service people. How do we connect the service people? So we built a feature, I call it Muddy Boots Connect, where you can take, as an operator of that pipeline and affiliate all your service companies. What does that do for you? Well, you can say then this service company, I'll give you an example, they'll do meter calibrations for us, right? But, they're only doing them in the south area, not the north area, right? So for an affiliate, you can say, here's the activities they're allowed to do and where they're allowed to do them. And then they literally can use Muddy Boots to record those activities. And we get great success with that. So, we've got oil companies out there that have 9, 10, 11 service providers doing calibration or swabbing or other kinds of inspections. And then all of that data is just there in your system.
Right.
Right. And I keep using this word activities. I mean, we have now, 500 plus different activities field people or service people can do. And every once in a while with service people, and I know I'm going on and on now, but they're going, well, we want to use our own system. And we're going, okay, but you've got a schedule with your client. So when you use your own system and you've got your own PDF, you just fire up the Muddy Boots activity. Okay, that job's done. Connect your PDF as attachment, and boom, it's all there, right? So, we just find ways to be accommodating for all the service people.
I was just going to say, Glenn, I think the value proposition of that for both the operator and the service company is they both have visibility into the work that's being performed.
The work, yeah,
right?
particularly the schedule, because the schedules are
Yeah,
always
exactly.
changing. Yeah,
They're always changing, and always need to know, what do I need to do to get somebody to this point to do this thing in this time frame, right?
that's right.
And having as a operator, having visibility across all my contractors to know, oh well, I can move this stuff around and just do that. There's huge value in that. And then likewise, as a knowing as a contractor that, okay, here's the work that the company has planned for me to do,
Yes,
and having visibility out. I mean, that's likewise a big deal.
it's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, what other kind of technical capabilities matter in a tool like this?
So,
We've talked about mobility and the ability to work offline. What other kind of technical capabilities matter?
Russell, there's a few things here, and if you think about how dynamic we are and the breadth of things we need to do, and we'll always need to do more things. We architected this with some pretty cool technology. Just to enumerate a couple, right? So, part of our database profile, part of the back end is a schemaless database that allows us to add new information on the go, literally. We also make
So let's unpack it and define schema lists for the listeners. So a database schema is a very structured definition of how I'm going to store the data, and a schema list is, well, the data can kind of be in any shape or form it wants to be.
any shape or form it wants to be, and it can morph, right? It can add, subtract. This customer needs these things, that customer does not want those things. And we tweak things for people's needs quite handily, right? Like on the go, over the phone.
Yeah,
Doing
that being a software guy blows my mind. It just blows up my whole mind, because
yeah,
I don't know how you do that.
yeah, yeah. What wasn't easy, but and I'll just say we've got some great architects behind the product, right? One of our original guys built up another piece of software that ended up having 2,000 clients, right? And you learned a lot of tricks. But Russell, just let me give you another one, because we make great use of this tool called Elasticsearch. And Elasticsearch, I think of as an index on everything. So literally, because we're dynamic, because we do so many things, if you want to go in and find, equipment failures or search on any term, you can. And Elasticsearch is that same tool that Google and Facebook use, for searching, right? So it's really, really cool, and it's got some aggregation features and so on and so forth, right? And then I think the other bit of technology is the way we do APIs, because we use Elasticsearch to find data. We use GraphQL to denormalize that and deliver. So we get connections to a lot of other applications, right? We import analysis from the labs. We deliver work orders. We receive work orders and MOCs from control room software, and all that kind of thing. So searching database APIs, I guess, is where we focus some pretty cool technology.
Yeah, again, Elasticsearch, it's one of those things I think's really cool, and I don't understand how it works. It's like I need some education there. I mean, I think everybody understands how quickly Google pulls things back, and it kind of knows that, if you type these 3 letters, you're likely to type these next 6, right? They just, however that
Yeah.
Elasticsearch is working, it's very, very strange. And the idea of working with data in a way that the data is very quick and it comes up, but it's not well structured. It's just counterintuitive, man. To me, it's just counterintuitive. But
Yeah.
I'm an old school software guy. I learned to do it a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So
not
you're not
what
going to
we've
tell
been
me any of
doing.
your secrets? What's the deal, man?
I think the deal's no more than listening to smart people and setting out a vision, right? So
Yeah, okay.
maybe setting out a vision and listening to smart people. So
Yeah, I want to know how to do schemaless data, and I want to know how to do Elasticsearch.
yeah,
So
you bet.
I think that's really real. I mean, being a little flippant here, but I think it's really critical when you start thinking about, building a cloud-based, field-centric, smart device-centric solution. Those two things are really critical.
Yes.
Because when I'm in the field on my phone and I need to search for something, I don't want to have to go through 15 menus, setting up filters and everything else to go find something.
They won't do it. No.
Yeah, exactly. And it also, for the younger generation, I mean, their expectation of how that stuff should work it's just different.
Yeah. Off the charts. Yeah.
Yeah. So what do you think the future is? What do you think are the things that are going to be happening with technology in the field for field operations?
I see a couple big trends here, and one is operations by exception, which goes under a few different names, but basically the high grading of what are my field people going to do, right? How can I reduce cost? How can I reduce windshield time and all of that by, uh, more intelligently scheduling and prioritizing their tasks. So we get asked about that a lot. We continue to add functions that help with that. For example, we just put in a permitting function. So, as a maintenance foreman, you can have somebody show up on site. You don't have to be there. You can sign the safe work permit, and get approval online and go off and have that person do their job, without wasting your travel time. Emissions is, a second trend that's we all have to pay a huge amount of attention to. I got a spreadsheet from a client this morning that said, we need to do this and we need to do it right away. And, it's all about tracking vent gas and tracking pneumatic devices and, and calculating methane use, all that. So that's huge. And we have some tools there now, and we're going to increase that portfolio. And maybe the third theme I'll mention is, and I hate using this word because it's so generic, but the Internet of Things. So people that build new devices, whatever they're for, like imaging devices that need a home for that data. You need a place for that data to come to.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, we handle what operators do. Yes, we handle what service companies do. And now we're getting many requests and doing better in terms of bringing data in from, the device manufacturers out there.
Yeah.
So that's some of the future stuff for sure.
Yeah, no doubt. No doubt. I certainly think there's going to be a lot more automation happening in the field. There's going to be a lot more data getting collected. I've certainly looked at this in depth as it relates to SCADA and operations and automation and all that. But when you start talking about mobile devices and their ability to interface with these devices in the field that are intelligent and can collect large data sets and give you the ability to visualize those large data sets, I mean, that creates some real opportunity, again, just to get to another level of efficiency and effectiveness.
Absolutely. Yep.
So
Absolutely.
I don't think for those of us that play in the software, we're going to run out of things to do.
Hasn't happened yet. No.
No, it hasn't. It hasn't. Well, look, let me ask you this kind of as a wind up question. What would you want pipeline operators to take away from this conversation?
I guess a few things. If you're using paper, why? If you are struggling to schedule what your technical people are doing in the field every day, there are better ways. If you need to be more dynamic about, how the calibration is done or checking a compressor or what have you, there are better ways. Okay. And lots of opportunities to do it better, but you have to think a bit holistically.
Right. Yeah. What is I can't remember it's basically one tool to handle it all.
One tool to handle it all. Yeah.
I think that if you can take and transform the role of the person running around in the pickup truck.
Yes.
From I've got a laptop and I've got to open up my laptop, fire up my laptop and get to the right application to do this thing I'm here to do, to I pick up my phone and it's already open to what I need it to be open to because it knows where I'm at and it knows what's on my schedule.
Yes.
That by itself, I mean, that's the real takeaway. That's what you want to do, right?
That's right.
I don't want to have to open up my laptop and figure out which app and open up the app and then open up the right record in the app in order to start putting data in, right?
That's right.
I can't tell you how many times I've done that in my pickup truck, and that took 15 minutes just to do that.
Oh, I know. Yep.
And then you get back to the office and you got to sync every one of those applications, right? Versus I roll up in my pickup truck and I look down at my phone and it's already got the right thing open because it knows my schedule and it knows where I'm at. And so it knows what to open.
That's right. And syncing for us means, at some point in time, you drive back into cell service and the information just transfers, right? It's a seamless operation.
Yeah. Well, listen, this has been fun. So I probably need to take you out on a hunting trip and get some good whiskey. And maybe I can learn a little bit about schemaless data and Elasticsearch.
That sounds like a plan, Russell. Yep.
All right. We'll figure out how to get that on the calendar.
You bet. All right. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of the Pipeliners Podcast and our conversation with Glenn. Just a reminder before you go, you should register to win our customized Pipeliners Podcast Yeti tumbler. Simply visit pipelinerspodcast.com/win and enter yourself in the drawing. If you'd like to support the podcast, please leave us a review on Apple Podcast, Google Play, or whatever app you happen to use to listen. You can find instructions at pipelinerspodcast.com. If you have ideas, questions, or topics you'd be interested in, please let me know on the Contact Us page at pipelinerspodcast.com or reach out to me on LinkedIn. Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you next week.